having quality make socketing easier, like just various things. And then sort of slowly over time, we kind of got to the point where we are now, where it's not like too hard to get the sockets you want. There's still a bit of challenge there, but it's not too bad. So we effectively made socket colors easy enough now that the old design goals have been long left behind. But what was sort of left over is this vestigial limb of the old way that it worked before. And that's really what we kind of wanted to address. So, I mean, for one thing, it's just really inconvenient having to shuffle all your gems around every time you want to equip a new item, right? Like, and the system is actually really difficult for new players to understand. Most you do the way that sockets for support gems and socket for active skill gems are the same sockets. We can't provide any kind of contextual hinting about what works and what. And the question of whether a support gem works with a skill gem is actually really hard. Like, there's all sorts of weird things with still types and tags and so on. Like, even our developers have trouble sometimes. And while we've added a lot of hints over time, what we really want is the ability to not even allow socketing that's incorrect. And another problem is, a bit more subtle. You can only have a maximum of 2 6 links. And many characters really only have 1, if they're using a one-handed weapon. So this means there isn't really a huge amount of skill diversity on a single character. Like, you have a bunch of utility skills, but you've usually just got 1 primary skill, and that's something we wanted to improve as well. So, we set out to design a new system for Path of Exile 2, and I want to talk a little bit about the design goals that we had. So, like, number 1 is that it absolutely had to be as deep as the current Path of Exile skill system. We couldn't regress even a single little bit in the depth of our skill system. Like, we're known as the action RPG with the deep skill system. And, like, I remember when we were in the keynote earlier, and I said, hey, there's no sockets on the items, everyone in the audience was like, what? Like, that was like a big concern, right? So, like, it's really important that it had to be just as deep. You can achieve everything you could do before in there as well. But at the same time, we also have to make sure that it's easier for new players to understand. So, we see a lot of new players that end up quitting. One of the things that you see on their characters, if you look at them, is that they've got their gems all set up wrong. Like, you look at the characters and like half the ones aren't working properly. They're not like socketed with skills that they work correctly with, and they're just all over the place. And the third problem was that, third goal rather, is that it had to be as easy as possible to change your items, right? Like for new players and old players alike, right? We want to make it so that if you go through the game, you find a new rare with awesome mods, we want you to be able to just drop it on, keep playing. You don't have to undergo like a multi-stage socket crafting project just because you found a better item, So, so it has to be more complicated, easier to understand, and easy to use. So that's kind of like the trifecta of you can't put these 3 things together, right? It is really difficult. But, we actually think we've come up with something pretty good. So we had a lot of ideas, but right from the beginning, I think like even from the very first moment that we were designing, we were like, you have to be able to put support gems directly into skill gems. It's going to fix a lot of things because there's quite a lot of positive results just from doing that. The first thing is that you can move entire supported clusters of gems into another socket in one go, which makes rearranging everything way easier. But also, we can only allow supports that work with specific skills to be socketed into them. So we can just enforce those rules. You can't make a mistake, right? Like if you pick up a gem, you can see immediately what things does this work with. And the third benefit is that it gives skill gems the ability to actually be valuable as items. Like rather than finding a valuable 6-link armor, you find a valuable 6-link fireball, which actually I think makes more sense. If you want a better skill, you find the better skill. And it's going to make them a bit more valuable. The other thing we knew we needed to have was a dedicated skill screen. The current method of futzing around with your items every time you need to change your skills just kind of had to go. It makes the process of finding a new item on the ground and putting it on just way too annoying. So we really needed a centralized place you could go and do your socketing and see your entire character's gems at a glance. So this actually really helps because you can actually see the DPS of your skills, like all together. The current method on the old character screen actually really sucks. It was actually quite confusing. There was there's kind of this paradigm there where it's like you select what skill you're looking at and then you see all your stats for your character, but like all the defensive stats are mixed in there. It's like it just kind of sucks. Now if you want to see the stats on a skill, you just go to the skill screen and they're all laid out there for you, and then all your defensive stats are back on the character screen, which has got another bit of an upgrade, by the way. You don't have to resocket your items. You can just feel free to swap them in and out however you want. And the thing though, wait, hang on a second. I think I might have rearranged some stuff here. Whatever. So hang on, let me just. Okay, I don't know why there was some text there. Right, so we've got right. I'm distracted now. Here we've got an item called, which is obviously you've all seen, Reach of the Council, and you can see obviously it's got 2 sockets on it. So the big question that we had to answer with regard to how is the skill system going to work? Like how do we determine the okay, sorry, I'm all flustered. Okay, how does an item like Reach of the Council work? Right, like with the new skill system, if you're going to separate out the sockets. So what we realized is that we really needed to have, we still needed to have sockets actually come from items. We just needed to do it a little bit differently from before. So then what we ended up with was something like this. So, it makes a lot more sense for items to drop with fixed, Jesus Christ, what is wrong with this thing? Oh, I understand now. I'm actually reading a slide ahead. This is the thing. Okay, right. I'm going to go all the way back. Sorry about this, guys. Okay. So, right, okay, so you can change your items freely, got that. But we still need to know, how do you get your primary sockets? Like, where do the various sockets that you get on your character actually come from? And so we went through a lot of different options to this, right? Like, do you get just a fixed number? Do you get them as you level up? Do you get them from the skill tree? But none of them really quite worked how we wanted. And that's when we realized that, we needed to solve this problem with items where a lot of them reference the sockets that are in them. So we actually need to make sure that the sockets are on the items after all. But it wouldn't really be very much good if you just, if the sockets were just random, because the problem is you just swap your item out, and then you would have to change your sockets anyway, because the colors would be different. So the thing that we realized is that we had to make it so that the items would have fixed sockets for each item class. So that is to say that if you find a bow, then that bow will always have 4 green sockets every time, unless you get to endgame and you modify them yourself. If it drops, then it's going to have 4 green sockets. For example, if you've got like a maul, that's going to have 2 red sockets and so on, right? So if you pick up an item and you like the look of it, you can always put it on. But with sockets coming from items again, things like socketed gems supported by level X whatever, they all work again due to that. And other mods that relate to things like triggering socketed skills and that kind of stuff, all of those things are work in the new system. And that solved a lot of the backwards compatibility problems that we had when we were designing. We were trying to work out how to design all this stuff. Now, of course, because support gems go into skill gems, we don't need nearly as many primary sockets as we did before. So we had to answer this question of how many sockets does the player actually have? So, before, in the system, we had this sort of really nice, cute thing where you could trade off support gems and skill gems, right? We had the downsides before where you couldn't have so many 6 links. But one really nice thing was that, if you look at things like auras, you could make this trade-off, right? Do you run a 4 link with just all 4 auras in it, unsupported completely? Do you put 3 auras, 1 support, in the middle one, or do you run 2 skills or 2 supports? You might do that occasionally. So, it would really suck if wanting to run 4 auras meant you had to use 4 of your really limited primary sockets. So we knew that we needed to have some kind of way to bring this kind of trade-off back into the system. And the answer to that is metagems. So basically, a metagem kind of turns the whole support thing upside down. Normally you have active skills with sockets for the supports. A metagem is kind of like a support that has sockets for actives. So going back to the aura example again, we made a metagem called proficiency. And proficiency is a meta skill that reduces the reservation cost of skills socketed into it. So with this, we actually have more options than we had before. Right? So here's a few sort of layouts. So the most obvious thing is obviously 5 auras in a proficiency gem, right? It's effectively a whole bunch of auras in one single slot. But you can also support, you can put a lot more support gems in that. For example, I could run 4 auras, 1 support, 2 or 3 or 4. And because the meta skill is actually a skill, we also made it so you can cast all of the socketed auras in one go with a single keybind, which is pretty handy. So the basic idea is that we can make meta skills for all the cases where players want to make these kinds of trade-offs. So there's a lot of things like summoners and so on. There's all sorts of meta skills. And we've changed a large number of existing supports into meta skills when it makes sense to do so. So for example, trigger gems, cast on crit, it makes a lot of sense to be a meta skill. A single cast on crit setup is actually just a single gem that goes into your thing of 8 there. And you can socket attacks and spells into it, and of course any supports that you want as well. So there's also some new behavior on existing things that we can unlock as well with the system, which we're really happy with. So before I sort of explained a meta gem as sort of like a backwards support gem, but actually the name meta gem comes from the idea that how I like to think of how it works is that a meta skill is a skill made of other skills. So I'm really interested to show you what happens on the totem support. So totem and ranged attack totem are meta skills now, and when you socket a totem with multiple active skills, you've created a single totem that you can use more than one skill. So check this out. This is a Blight Wither totem. We've got an AI in place so the totem will first curse each monster until every monster in its range is cursed, and then after that it will switch to its other skills. So all of the AI currently is just hard-coded, so curses happen first and other skills happen later. But we're actually planning on having more AI options that you can have that you can customize, what the totems do and when they cast what and so on. So with this in mind, we were able to work out once we've made all these sort of changes and worked out the whole meta skill concept, we were finally able to decide how many primary support gems your gear should have. And we landed on 8. So that's 2 each for your hand slots, or 4 if you're a two-hander, 2 for your armor, 1 for your helmet, 1 for your gloves, 1 for your boots. And we looked at a lot of typical characters that you'd have online to sort of make sure that all of them that we had could sort of work with this with the sort of 8 primary skill sort of limit there. And we found that it was in a really good place. So there's still trade-offs to make, but we really didn't want it to feel restrictive, like, oh, I just can't get the sockets I need. And with that in mind, we also have other options. So for example, this is tabula rasa in 400, 3 white sockets. And a single extra socket is actually really valuable when you only have one, when you've got 8 primaries, having 1 extra is actually really valuable. But then there's also things like Prismatic Edge, which still has 3 sockets with 1 color. Then there's Unset Ring, which gives a white, it gives a single random colored socket as well. So there's actually a lot of options for getting more sockets if you need them, which we imagine will be the case for certain classes. You might have noticed that if there's only 1 socket on a helmet, and strength helmets have red sockets, and dex helmets have green sockets, then what does a strength dex helmet have? And the answer is a red-green hybrid. So the socket can either have a red or a green gem in it. And this was something we found really had to add, because when you've only got 8, the colors are fixed per base class, the color constraints were just too limiting. So adding hybrid sockets was really important, and it gives you a lot more options for off-class skill gems as well. So that fixed a problem that we had. So, but yeah, when we checked a lot of characters and we made sure all of them would work with the new skill system design, we found an interesting thing. During leveling, the fixed socket stuff was really, really good. But by the time you get to maps, it really wasn't working out. Like you needed more ability to be flexible. So for that reason, we're adding a currency item to high level that lets you modify socket colors on items as well. While every equipment that drops will have colors fixed, there's still a way to reroll later. Where do sockets on skills come from? So basically, they're generated randomly as the skill gem spawns. What I'm showing on the screen here is basically at what point you are able to get this number of sockets on the items. So as you basically play through the game and as you level up your gem as well, you'll be able to re-roll the gems you have or find new ones that have more sockets, basically. So the high level, yeah, that's right, I said that. Great. So, of course, you can re-roll the number of sockets you have on Jeweler's Orb, and of course, you can still use chromatics to re-roll the colors as well. So in the past, the game was finding 6-link armors that had 2-hand weapons. Now it's about finding 6-link skills. If you want to fully optimize your character, you're going to need to get 8 6-links now. We'll have to balance like how hard that is to get. Gems can actually be valuable drops again, and they never really were in PoE, and so we think that'll be a good thing. The other thing we're adding, by the way, just in order to address the fact that you're going to be finding new gems, with more sockets you have to do, is with the ability to destroy a gem and set another gem to have the same amount of experience as that gem had. So that's just if you've got a level 3 fireball and you find a level 1 fireball with bad sockets, you just move the experience from one to the other and continue on your way. If the sockets on gems are implicitly linked, where does that leave fusings? Well, the answer is bad luck. You don't have any use anymore. We're probably going to convert them to jewelers at some ratio that will work out that's fair, and that'll happen in the giant PoE2 mega migration that we're going to have to do, which is going to be a lot of fun because we have to work out how to convert everyone's standard characters from having all the links they've got in their items into having a new skill system, which is going to be kind of weird. So that's going to be interesting. So. So we're nearly there on the skill system. But last but not least, what about items like Whispering Ice? The answer to that's kind of cool. The Whispering Ice has now got adds an extra skill to your skill screen, and it's got its own sockets built into it for the skill on it. So you can actually re-roll those sockets with currency, with chromatics and jewelers to let you use that sort of stuff as well. Okay, so that was just like a mammoth information dump. I just sort of sat here and said a bunch of stuff. Hopefully you've got an idea about how the design process kind of went down for re-engineering Path of Exile skill system from the ground up. So now I'm going to talk to these two guys about Ascensi classes. So